And thanks for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. You're listening to Tamara Scott Live with Truth for Our Time. Great show, good information. Michelle Crystal talking to us about Iowa. Meeting tonight, 4:30, Waukee School.
Correct.
4:30 to 6:30. You need to go if you're in the area. More meetings coming up. You can get a hold of those. I've put a link to those meetings on the Truth for Our Time Facebook page. I also have put a link to the Fordham analysis of the New Generation Science Standards, which are only one grade level above what we have currently in Iowa, costing us a whole lot more money for very little gain. And also then joining us, I believe Ann Gassel has stepped away, but Gretchen Logue is still on the phone with Missouri Education Watchdog. And Ann Arthurs is with us from Louisiana. And now joining us is Erin Tuttle in the discussion. Erin, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, we've all just kind of been easing into the conversation, and someone just brought up the Lamar Alexander's bill, and you have been studying it and done white papers and explanations on it.
Well, I've done a lot of research on it, as I know many people have, including Gretchen. And I think it's interesting because when I was listening to your show earlier and you're talking about the National Science Standards,
yep,
it might be shocking to hear, or maybe it isn't shocking to this crew, but Indiana, who had A science standards, a grade of A, is also now contemplating adopting the next generation science standards.
For a whopping C? You would trade a grade A to a whopping C. Why would they do that?
Exactly, and it's interesting because I was looking to our State Board of Ed agenda, and they had a memo on the adoption of the Next Generation Science Standards, and the format they want to follow sounds very similar to the one that she was talking about earlier, to have this task force and all of this. So I think it is not a coincidence that these states are all following sort of the same model. And it begs the question, where is it coming from? And I think most of us would agree it's coming from a lot of places, but mostly from Washington, D.C. So that's why I think it's important to pay attention to the reauthorization bill, because so much of what we do is not state-led. It's kind of force-fed from the federal government.
And you're talking about the No Child Left Behind reauthorization bill.
That's right. And I'm not an attorney, and I don't claim to be an expert, but, a lot of us, and Gretchen included, who have followed the waivers and followed the race to the top and followed those applications and have read them carefully, you start to familiarize yourself with certain language, language that you see in the waivers, in race to the top, means certain things. It caused certain things to be implemented in certain ways. And so when you see some of the same language in Senator Lamar Alexander's bill, it strikes you. What might seem fairly like reasonable language or kind of innocuous in its effect. When you know what those things do, you realize that it will have a very serious implication for states and their ability to govern education policy at the state level.
And he did add in this bill the subjects that are going to be required to have standards that meet his approval, or meet Arnie Duncan's approval for the Title I funds. It does include science. It was, it's not just math, reading, and language arts, but they did add science. So it's interesting, Erin. How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, that might be another reason, too, now that you're saying that. It triggered something about your state changing, to once again move towards these common science standards.
Now, I thought Lamar Alexander had a bill forward that was going to squelch, the terminology I saw, I think it was from Politico, would squelch the number of federal standardized tests. Is that a different bill? Is that just fancy language on this bill?
Well, they say all these great things. The purpose written into the law, whereas the purpose, its stated purpose, is to restore freedom to parents and teachers, principals, and other school leaders, states, governors, and local communities so that they can improve their local public schools. You'll see all kinds of language in it that it's going to do all of these great things, but then all of these great, proclamations are all negated by other language. Like, for example, every state has to supply the Secretary of Education with their state plan, and your state plan is supposed to provide assurances that you have state standards, that you have assessments aligned to the standards, and that you have an accountability system in place for schools who are not, meeting those standards as evidenced by the assessment. So in that, they say, so when you are going to present the Secretary of Education with your state plan, it requires in Senator Lamar Alexander's bill that the standards be aligned to that standards that will, and I'm quoting here, specify what children are expected to know. Oh, I'm sorry, that's what it used to be. So No Child Left Behind used to say that the standards had to specify what children are expected to know and do, be able to do, contain coherent and rigorous content, and encourage the teaching of advanced skills. So that's pretty broad. A state could develop their set of standards using those parameters and still come up with their own fairly unique set of standards.
Right.
So that language is gone, and now it says that the standards must have alignment, and that alignment has to be with, and I quote, the entrance requirements without the need for academic remediation for an institution of higher education in the state. Now, that language is very familiar, right? That's the same language that they used in the waiver, that we had to have standards that were college and career ready. Mm-hmm. Well, college and career ready, that's the definition that they use. It aligns with the entrance requirements for post-secondary institutions without remediation. That's the same language they have in Race to the Top. Now, in both of those applications, your state institutions of higher ed, your post-secondary state public universities made assurances that they would align their entrance requirements to the expectations of Common Core. So you see, by putting this in here, a state plan cannot be submitted unless the standards are aligning with the Common Core expectations. Mm-hmm. Because that's what the entrance requirements are going to be at your state universities. They already are. They've already gone through. I mean, most of them, this has already been completed. So they made these assurances years ago in these applications, and they've been working very steadily towards that aim. So does that make, I know it's kind of a little technical, but, what you think, because an average person would read that and say, well, why wouldn't you want, your standards to be aligned to, colleges and what they expect from students? That sounds reasonable. But when you know what they really mean by that, I know it means you have to align to the Common Core.
Right. Michelle Crystal in studio has a question.
Yeah, Erin, just kind of looking, you're saying a lot of similar things that I have seen, and two things that you brought up that are very glaring to me is the standards need to meet what they say for you to receive Title I funding.
Your Secretary of Education will now have the ability to accept, approve, or disapprove.
So Title I funding is a very big deal for a lot of schools. So now they're being forced, coerced, and pretty much blackmailed to do what we say. Otherwise, we're going to withhold these funds. And secondly, I'm looking at the task force here in Iowa. The reason they said they picked Smarter Balance is because the Department of Ed said that the state must switch the test in order to comply with No Child Left Behind, which requires the school to test students' academic progress based on a set of standards. So instead of Iowa assessments or your state creating their own assessment, they're saying, oh gosh, we have to use this Smarter Balance, which takes away 100% of your state's sovereignty or any input at all. And it's basically the federal government is saying, if you don't do what we say, we're going to withhold these Title I funds, which is very scary to every school district I know of.
And illegal to the intent of our Constitution.
Well, and then there's a move, this is Gretchen, there's a move to make all students designated as Title I students. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah.
They brought, instead of Title I schools, it's Title I children and students, and then there's a portability. They're trying to have that Title I. Those Title I funds will then follow that child to whichever school they go to, be it a private school. There's a section about the private schools on there, which a private school shouldn't even be mentioned in a federal bill as far as I'm concerned because it's a private school. My children go to a small Catholic school, which is a private school, which has taken vouchers. Well, this is their way to tie in those requirements with those children that are taking the vouchers. Those children are going to have to be taught to those standards, take those tests. So will a school, when they agree to do that, then they're going to say, well, might as well teach all of our students, not just those Title I.
I think they'll have to teach all the students.
Exactly, and they may be. The language I couldn't figure out. I've been studying it as well, but it will require. There's the requirement. That is how they're going to get the Common Core in there.
So, Erin, I hate this. We're out of time. What can parents do right now? Quickest recourse.
The quickest recourse would be to call your congressman and tell them that you do not support it's called the Every Child College or Career Ready Bill. Just the title of the bill alone gives it away, right? Every Child College and Career Ready. And tell them that you do not support Senator Lamar Alexander's bill and that, you want it to be killed.
Very good.
We want something good to come out of this. We need a good reauthorization bill. What's a great thing to ask for? Just block grant all federal monies back to the state with no strings attached. Mm-hmm. That's what we ask for.
Great. Block grant all Fed funds back to the state, no strings.
Yep, that's it.
Better yet, keep the money at home. Don't even send it there in the first place. Local control.
Exactly. One step at a time.
My guest today on the phone, Gretchen Logue. We had Ann Gassel on earlier. Ann Arthur's on. I think, Ann, are you even still there?
I am.
Bless your heart. Thanks for staying with us. Erin Tuttle, Michelle Crystal here. The moms are busy and they are organized, and nobody can create a quilting circle faster than moms who are going to weave this together and blanket this country with good news, with good truth, and good information and options for us. Ladies, some of you, I hope maybe you'll come back next week and we'll continue this conversation because there's just too much here. We need to keep parents going on this.
Would love to.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your time, for putting your time into this, for caring about our kids enough to invest the time in this, for those brave moms who are putting their names on a lawsuit. Now, understand the problem with this. Bad law creates this scenario where it costs taxpayers the court cost to figure it out. That should not be. Bad law should be clear and with good understanding of how it will affect the body political. So thank you so much, Michelle, for joining me in studio. You've got meetings to attend in Iowa. If you want information, Truth for Our Time Facebook page has the Fordham rundown on NGSS and the list of meetings for Iowa. And I'll also put all of those guests that were on today's show on that Facebook page. Ryan Northfield, thanks for making us look good. And let you know also, National Committee people, your National Committee men and women for the Republican Party, I've talked to several before 8 a.m. this morning, are out lobbying on your behalf at your state houses for your liberty. So give them their due as well. Thank you all for joining in, for carrying in. I am Tamara Scott. Be encouraged and never be complacent.